In 2002, Top Gear was relaunched after a brief hiatus after it being on the air for over 24 years. However, Jeremy Clarkson and lifelong friend and producer Andy Willman envisioned a radical departure than what had come before. The dry review magazine-style motoring show would be thrown out the window in favour of an explosive, funny, and cinematic production, built around personalities, challenges, and cars pushed to their limits. However, one crucial element was missing: someone who could actually drive. Well, better and faster than any of the presenters, that is. Although Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and later James May was skilled, none of them had the consistency of a professional level racing ability needed to benchmark cars fairly. Thus was born the idea of an anonymous test driver. Initially, Clarkson and Willman considered simply hiring a racing driver as themselves. However, they worried that giving the driver a face and voice might distract from the host, or worse, lead to personality clashes. Instead, they decided on a masked character who would be stripped of any identity, speaking ability, and even name.
We had, when this was before Top Gear went on air, so we're talking about 2001, and we were trying to work out, Jeremy and I, the lineup of the show, and we still had half a head back in the old Top Gear, which was Quentin, Tiff, Jeremy, Vicky. They were the main, Quentin, Tiff, Jeremy, and Tiff is a racing driver who can speak, who's intelligent, a rare thing, and he's going around doing his stuff. And when we started to put the new one together, we had Hammond, we'd hired him, we had sort of Jason Dorr then. So you've got Jeremy, Jason Dorr, Hammond, got 3 people, and we were still looking for a Tiff, a racing driver who could drive and speak. And I was like, I had this huge whiteboard, which was like full Minority Report, moving this around, moving that around. And we had it in the office. And then Jeremy came in one evening and I was like, arrows and writing everywhere. And he's like, what's occurring? And I was like, I can't make this work. If we're an hour-long show and we're doing 3 films and in the studio, I was like, there's 3 of you have all got to do something. You, Jason, and Richard Hammond. And it's like, so the racing driver, what the does he do? I can't get a scenario, even if we can find one who can speak, which is rare. Where do you put him? What's he do? Yeah. And Jeremy's like, yeah, I see what you mean. And then he just like sat there, and this is him. He's like, hang on, why does he need to speak? And I was like, what do you think? What do you mean? What do you mean? He was like, he said, I can do all that slidey stuff that Tiff does, because I think Tiff taught him. He said, I could do the slidey with all the smoke coming off the tyres. He said, but what I cannot do is what racing drivers do, which is lap after lap, tenth of a second, perfection. I can't do it. So he said, so if we've got our track and we're going to do lap times and have a board, a leaderboard, because we knew early on that lists were important. I think Kieran behind the camera here would agree. Men like lists.
Top trumps.
Top this, top that. Men in particular, if we're allowed to say that men and women have different kinds of ways of thinking. Men do like lists. Nick Hornby in High Fidelity. I remember you see it there brilliantly. It's like lists, top 5 lists, top albums, da-da-da-da-da. So we were going to have the leaderboard because we thought people like lists. And then Jeremy went, yeah, why does he need to talk? He goes, I'll slide about, yada yada, smoky tyres. And then he went, and I watched Pulp Fiction the other night, and do you remember the Gimp who comes out of the cellar with the mask on? And he went, we just keep the driver anonymous, and then people will try and guess who he is, and he never speaks, and he just does the lap time, and we'll call him the Gimp after Pulp Fiction.
This faceless racing driver would ultimately bring 3 things to the new iteration of Top Gear: consistency in lap times, a sense of drama and mystery, and provide endless opportunities for jokes and myths about his identity. It turns out the name The Stig is actually from a term that was used at Repton School, where both Clarkson and Andy Willman studied as kids. New students at Repton were apparently traditionally called Stigs. It was also the safer and more PC version of the original name they had in mind, The Gimp.
Jeremy said, I've got an idea for a new show called Carmageddon. And he said, I've got this idea where we're going to have a racing driver who never speaks, but he's called the Gimp. He wasn't called the Stig. 3 days before we go on air, the lawyers come in and say to Jeremy and Andy, you can't call him the Gimp. They said, Quentin Tarantino's film Pulp Fiction, there's a character in black leather called the Gimp, and he's very litigious. You've got to change it. And we're going, what the hell? He's the Gimp. And then Jeremy goes, I'm going to call him the Stig. And I said, that's a terrible idea. What does that mean? And he said, there'll only be a handful of people in the whole world who'll know what it means, but I don't care. That will give me pleasure. And that's where the name came from. And he said, only anybody that's been to Repton in that generation would know why I'm calling him the Stig.
When it came to the casting of the Stig, Clarkson and Willman turned to British racing driver Perry McCarthy. Perry McCarthy's story in itself is one of grit and resilience. His working class upbringing meant that he had no natural access to the expensive world of motorsport, but carried a fierce determination that would later become part of his driving persona. After leaving school, he began work as an oil rig diver in the North Sea, which in itself demonstrates the balls this guy has on him. The money he earned was funneled directly into funding his early racing ambitions. By the 1980s, McCarthy was competing in the junior ranks of British motorsport. He made his name in Formula Ford and Formula 3, two categories that often acted as springboards to Formula 1. He earned a reputation as a brave, hard-changing driver who could squeeze pace from underfunded machinery. But while he had the raw talent, McCarthy never had the deep financial backing that so often determines who makes it in the top tiers of racing. Despite the obstacles, he worked his way into Formula 3000, which at the time was the final stepping stone before Formula 1. His performances, while often compromised by uncompetitive teams, were spirited enough to catch the eye of a struggling Andrea Motor Formula 1 outfit in 1992. That year marked McCarthy's official entry into F1. Unfortunately, it also marked one of the sport's darkest teams. Andrea Motor was notorious for lack of preparation, underfunding, and chaos. McCarthy's F1 career was effectively doomed before it even began. He never successfully qualified for a Grand Prix. In fact, he didn't even have the chance to turn in a proper lap during some events, as the team frequently failed to provide him with a functioning car. It was an experience he later described with both frustration and his trademark humour, cementing his reputation as the unluckiest man in Formula 1. Although his F1 stint was brief, it added to his legend as a racer who fought against impossible odds. After his Formula 1 attempt, McCarthy continued competing in other categories and endurance events, like the 24-hour Le Mans race. It was also around this time where Perry released a book titled Flat Out, Flat Broke, Formula 1 the Hard Way, which detailed his incredible F1 adventure. However, it was at the book launch where Clarkson asked Perry to consider becoming the Gimp.
That Jeremy said, hey, listen, we're bringing Top Gear back. Yeah. We've got this great idea for you. You know, you're going to be dressed all in black, because first Stig was in black, so black gloves, black crash helmet.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was
black overalls, no, black gloves, and he said, and we're going to call you the Gimp.
Oh. I mean, you were delighted at that point.
I said, no, you're not, son. And they were real keen on it, seriously. And in the end, thank God, we settled on the Stig, which was what they used to call their junior kids at the school both Andy Willman and Jeremy Clarkson went to. So, but it was they were real keen on calling it the Gimp, and I just thought, I really don't want that tag.
No.
Yeah. So Jeremy is really under control about racing drivers. He thinks we're all worthless.
Right.
So, and I thought, okay, I like the gag. And even if I didn't, definitely better than the Gimp.
This original Stig would wear an all-black racing suit and a black visor helmet. The first episode of the new revitalised Top Gear aired on the 20th of October 2002, with it introducing a few segments that would go on to define the show, and a star in a reasonably priced car. For this segment, Perry would often fool celebrities of who he was by putting on a fake French accent, which to some sounded German, leading rumours to circulate that the Stig could potentially be multiple F1 world champion Michael Schumacher. To preserve his anonymity, McCarthy would even arrive on set with his helmet on and pretend to be mute, all to avoid tabloids sniffing out his identity. However, with the benchmark laps, it was one of the rare times that viewers could actually judge supercars on an even footing, giving Top Gear increased credibility because the non-verbal helmet provided precise and consistent results. In that very first episode, Clarkson introduced the Stig for the very first time, where he would test the Lamborghini Murcielago against the Pagani Zonda. This black Stig quickly became part of Top Gear's DNA and the world building that was taking place in the early stages of the show. However, during filming of the third series, Perry was relieved as a Stig after he allegedly violated a non-disclosure agreement that had been put in place by the production team upon the re-release of his autobiography in September 2003. With Perry's identity being exposed, rather than continue with a known driver, Clarkson and Willman decided to kill him off in classic Top Gear theatrics. In Series 3, Episode 1, Black Stig was shown driving off the deck of an aircraft carrier in a Jaguar XJS, disappearing into the sea. After being relieved of his role on Top Gear, Perry became a popular after-dinner speaker, leaning into his comedic side, with him often describing himself as a comedian in a racing driver's body. Replacing McCarthy required reinventing reinvention of the character. In the third series, the Stig returned to the show, now clad in a white racing suit and helmet, kind of signifying that this was a new evolution and a new chapter. The man inside this new suit was professional racing driver Ben Collins.
I went around failing screen tests at different outlets. So I went to the sort of 3 different channels. I actually met John Bentley for one screen test when I had to walk around a car in a car park, which for some reason, I mean, I never really wanted to be on television. I was quite a shy person. So this was horrific. Even though it was in the middle of nowhere, but there was somebody about half a kilometre away that could have seen that I was making an ass of myself. At least walking around a car felt like familiar territory. So I did that. John Bentley had been the guy who discovered Clarkson, but he clearly just didn't discover any skills in me. So I was jogged on to the next interview. By the 3rd or 4th, I'd been in touch with Top Gear. I'd seen the programme, read the magazine. I loved the irreverent humour, and as a kid, I'd sort of seen occasionally, there was the Noel Edmonds version of Top Gear in the 70s. He had a big mullet and did lots of different TV shows. I was badgering these guys, poor people, and sending my CV in. I later found out that Willman had a technique for assessing, big wads of CVs, which was to look at the pile, take the top half and throw that in the trash, dismiss the unlucky ones, and then review the remainder. So I must have been in that smaller part of the pile. Anyway, we got there, down to the track to sort of do an audition on track. He gave me the keys to a Ford Focus, so that was the thing. Took me around this airfield, which when you first go there, it's billiard table flat, so it was where they developed the Harrier jump jet, a lot of aeronautics and things that were based out of there, and I think it had another use in World War II, but airfields are pretty flat, so you can't identify any corners. It's all a mystery. There were some lines here and there painted on the track, so he was pointing these out, and I was trying to figure out where everything was. A couple of tyre walls that you didn't want to hit. Anyway, it was a figure of 8, so you kind of went around and came back on yourself. So he showed me this at slow speed, climbed out, then brandished a stopwatch and stared at me with his thumb on the sort of trigger button, and that was my cue to go. So it was a standing start, which is unusual for racing, because you normally, unless you're doing a hill climb, you circulate. Had to make a decent pull away. I did about 2 or 3 sort of flying laps, felt I had a pretty good feel for the course, and was pushing and trying to really carry speed through the follow through, which is critical because it basically joins the straight. There really aren't many straights at the Top Gear track, hardly any at all actually, and they're joined by this very high speed S. So I was really tilting it through that, trying to make up some time, trying to brake late, which is how I draw speed out of a car, and sort of by lap 3 or 4 felt that was pretty much there, and he looked very nonplussed with the whole situation. So I thought, this is not going particularly well, and he said, is that as fast as you can go? And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like, okay, so see you later. And that was that. And I thought, well, I'll just tick another one off the box that's not interested. So I didn't hear anything from them, but about a month later I did get a phone call or a text. So 2002 this was, saying, can you be at the track on Tuesday? And that was how I started, and I had no idea. Turned up and there was white overalls in the pilot's changing room, and that was it.
Collins began racing in karting before moving to competitive single-seater categories in the mid-1990s. After studying law at the University of Exeter, he pursued his passion for racing full-time. He competed in Formula Vauxhall and British Formula 3, 2 of the UK's most competitive development series for aspiring Formula 1 drivers. Although he didn't make it to F1, he proved himself quick and adaptable, showing strong performances in the junior categories despite limited budgets. His career then branched out into endurance and touring car racing, competing at Le Mans multiple times, driving high-performance prototypes and GT cars. Alongside endurance racing, he entered the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series in the United States. An unusual step for a British driver, but it demonstrated Ben's willingness to take on unfamiliar challenges. But it wasn't just the track that Ben was well versed in. He became a highly sought-after precision and stunt driver, working on multiple film productions. His Hollywood credits eventually included blockbuster franchises like James Bond, The Dark Knight, and later Mission Impossible. This ability to push cars to the limit while performing for cameras would perfectly translate for his role on Top Gear. Collins' white Stig became more than just a test driver. He featured in challenges, police chase sequences, amphibious cars, snowmobile stunts, appeared in sketches, and interacted with celebrities during the recently priced car segment. However, remaining anonymous was obviously a big part of the job, which Ben took extremely seriously.
I knew enough about the show and about the character that it had to remain anonymous, which I sort of took to the nth degree. So whenever I was arriving at the track, I automatically just knew to bring a balaclava. So I would roll up in jeans and a t-shirt with a hood on like a terrorist, and really kept to myself. I just thought the easiest way to maintain this secrecy is just don't tell anybody, don't ever get seen, and enjoy it, which is what I did. Literally, don't tell anybody. I think it's pretty foolproof. I mean, this must be what they do in the CIA, I guess. I just, it's the same as that, but without the risk of death. Really, it's punishable by firing only, not by firing squad. After a few years, though, it was more dangerous, some people not knowing, than trying to guess or chat about, I don't know where he goes and all that kind of stuff. So I think a few years in, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, I did let slip that this is what I was doing, and that was kind of cool. And you definitely can't trust your friends with this information because they're going to tell everybody. But after about sort of 4 years, there was enough leakage in the press that I was better off telling a few close friends than trying to lie to them. Every day was something completely different. There was a Stig before me who wore a black suit, and he only lasted 9 months. I thought if I can outstretch that amount of time, then this has got to be good. So by year 2, I was excited, and I managed to get rid of the terrible. The first suit I was given was like a tea bag. It was pretty feral, and it was too small. I don't know who it was built for, but they must have thought all racing drivers are sort of like garden gnomes, and I'm 6 foot now, 6'1". I upgraded myself to an Alpine Star suit, got a different style Simpson helmet, and kind of started to play a bit more with the role and what I thought character was, which is kind of like the racing version of Mick Dundee from Crocodile Dundee. He's never seen an escalator and doesn't like things, or gets ornery about Formula One drivers, who then started turning up, also wanting to have a drive around the track in this reasonably priced rental car, which is crazy. You kind of throw the cat amongst the pigeons, throwing a racing driver into a room full of TV people. I mean, famously, when they're explaining why the Stig didn't talk, because they didn't want to hear anything a racing driver had to say. Although off camera, I would spend a lot of time chatting to Jeremy, like, he said, what was that car like? Because I'd go out and thrash its guts out and push it and find out where are the weak points. That's the great part of the performance tests that we do. Even if we focus on doing a lap time to get that, but that's just benchmarking. But everything up until that point, you'll see at the pans, you've got a very short amount of time. With the modern tyres on the studio day, they had a frenetic schedule. They had to go through their interviews, all their different pieces of news they were getting out, and then also he would be doing a sort of live presentation on the car they had in the studio. So it's quite quick download of what it was doing, and it was pretty magic. So I would try and get through my stuff in the morning, do the celeb training bits, and actually there'd be a window after lunch when they would do the guest interviews, and that was great to watch and see how they managed the studio, how the interview would go, again, and feedback on what they were like in the car and what their learning process was like. So I would always sit with the editor, the track editor, reviewing all the laps they'd done, because I'd sat with them for most of them, and I'd seen where they'd spun off or where they struggled, and then highlight that for their edit, because they had a quick sort of 15-minute turnaround to edit that footage, show it live to the audience, and then that's what you saw on a Sunday. So for the studios, it was a day a week. So when it was in series, if you had 7 episodes, you'd do 7 Wednesdays in a row to hit those studio points. We'd have the pre-recorded stuff, which they would also show, but then from Wednesday till Sunday, there would be an editing process that Wilman was heavily involved with, lots of late nights eating cheese sandwiches, and he was one of those people who very exacting. So I'd go and meet the editor sometimes, and they would just say, we've been at it since Wednesday, and we barely got it finished on a Saturday morning or whatever, and if something's not right, he'd tear it up and start again. So it was really the attention to detail to get that quality right. The standard was extremely high, and that's, I think, and you can see it, some of that footage is timeless.
In 2009, during the first episode of the 13th season, Clarkson teased the audience by claiming that they would finally be unmasking the Stig. The studio lights dimmed, the helmet came off, and it was the 7-time F1 world champion, Michael Schumacher. The crowd erupted. However, Clarkson admitted it was in fact a joke. But some people have argued that the appearance of Michael Schumacher was actually a one-off to draw attention away from Ben Collins, who at the time was heavily rumoured to be the Stig at that point. The following year in 2010, Collins decided to publish an autobiography titled The Man in the White Suit. This resulted in newspaper speculation that the Stig's true identity was Collins, based on the financial reports of his company. The BBC tried to stop the release of this book, arguing that his contract required secrecy and would breach confidentiality obligations. When asked about the whole situation, James May joked, "Obviously, I'm now going to have to take some legal action of my own, because I've been the Stig for the past 7 years, and I don't know who this bloke is who's mincing about in the High Court pretending it's him." After losing the case, the BBC released a statement in response to the outcome, stating, "The Top Gear audience has always made it clear that they enjoy the mystery surrounding the identity of the Stig, and the BBC felt it was important to do all it could to protect that anonymity. The BBC brought this action as we believe it is vital to protect the character of the Stig, which ultimately belongs to the licence fee payer. Today's judgment does not prevent the BBC from pursuing this matter to trial, and the BBC will not be deterred from protecting such information from attack, no matter when or by whom it should arise." After 7 years and 101 episodes, this event ended his tenure as the Stig. For the BBC, it was the ultimate betrayal of the myth. For Collins, it was arguably the chance to cash in on years of silence. Following Series 15's conclusion, this white Stig was not killed off like the black Stig. In the first of 2 Christmas specials for 2010, the presenters simply stated that the Stig was gone, likening their presenting team to that of the band members of Genesis. Remarks and passing comments about the fiasco would be made throughout the following series, including shooting the out of a cutout of the Stig. In recent years, Ben has done interviews where he detailed his experience going through legal battles with the BBC and the aftermath of leaving Top Gear.
The racing, like I said, it's always about money, this, that, the other. And, we were going to the plan was to go and do Le Mans, but they needed a driver to pay for it. And I thought, I'm back to square one. It's absolutely back to square one. I just
Even
couldn't
with the funding of the show and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so that was kind of a breaking point. And I just thought, you know what, I put so much into this. I want this to be so cool. I thought, Stig going racing would be the be all end all. And that really was hard to sort of swallow. And there were a few other things too that were like that, where, I couldn't be in all different places at the same time. But I felt that actually I'd been incredibly loyal, and it was really difficult. And I was still, on a very short-term contract, one day at a time, pretty much. So it was.
And who was helping you with that behind the scenes, get through that?
Well, we were all there because we loved it. So, and this is the thing. So I only have a positive reflection of my time. I absolutely loved it. It was the best job in the world until I felt that the time was up. And I think it had grown so big, and you've got to just accept. I either stay here and accept that's the way it is, or go and do something else. So I decided to do something else, and that was to forge a new career. And now that's in a completely different direction. But leaving was the hard thing. So having decided to go, I thought, again, I was aware it was this huge thing. When I started Top Gear, it was around a sort of 2 million audience. By the time I left, it was 500 million worldwide. 72 countries were broadcasting it. Stig was it was everything from a stress doll to a morning clock. It was on lunchboxes. I'd seen people walking around the high street in London with an I Am the Stig shirt. It had become a thing. And the BBC is a big organisation. You don't want to tangle with them. So I wanted to do it the right way. Also, I wanted to do right by my boss, but I also wanted to do right by myself. So I considered what I was going to do, but I handed my notice in, basically. And so my last series, I think, the last guests I had, not knowing they'd be the last guests, because I didn't know at the start of the series, but my last show was Tom Cruise and Cameron Diaz. So that was an amazing way to go out. Pretty cool. And it was really hard, sort of saying to, someone who'd become a friend, this is my last series, this is where I'm going, I've loved it, let's work it out. But ultimately, it became a legal battle, and it was a pretty unpleasant one.
Because you wanted to come out as I Am the Stig, your t-shirt was the only real one.
Yes, exactly. And, I've been there 8 years. That's a massive hole in your CV. If you just, you go on to your next thing, what did you do for the last 8 years? Not much. And it also seemed to me an opportunity for someone else to come in and start fresh. But again, not my decision to make necessarily. That's not my show. But freedom of speech is an important thing.
After Collins, the Stig continued to live on, this time portrayed by record-breaking British GT driver Phil Keane. Phil burst onto the GT scene in 2009, where he won 8 of the 14 races that season. Across the years, he amassed an incredible 19 GT championship wins and 12 pole positions, making him the most successful driver in the championship's history. So when Ben left in 2010, Phil was approached to quietly step into the iconic role. For 12 years, from 2010 until the series halted in 2022, he performed the hallmark duties of setting lap times, training celebrity guests, and showing up where needed. Phil's era coincided with Top Gear's global peak. DVDs, merchandise, memes, and live arena shows all leaned into the Stig's silent mystique. Unlike Ben, Keane was keen to stay firmly behind the mask, allowing the myth to outshine the man. His Stig also set some of the fastest lap times ever recorded in the Ferrari 488 Pista, Porsche 918 Spider, and the McLaren P1. His precision and years of GT experience kept the test track relevant, even as the presenters moved towards bigger budgets. And even when Clarkson, May, and Hammond left the show in March 2015, Phil decided to remain behind the mask and stay for the various terrible iterations the BBC put in front of viewers. Although, saying that, there was obviously nothing wrong with Phil's driving. However, when Top Gear was finally put to rest in 2022, after Freddie Flintoff's injury and numerous other problems, the Stig quietly disappeared too. If you're interested, I've also made videos documenting both these incidents, which I highly recommend you check out, and the rest of the TG back catalogue. In fact, the Stig disappeared so quietly into the night that it wasn't until 2024 that Clarkson officially confirmed that Phil Keane was the Stig during a Q&A session.
The original Stig was Perry McCarthy, followed by Ben Collins, followed by Phil Keane. Well, there isn't a current Top Gear, so there isn't a current Stig.
To this day, Phil still races and uses his skills to the max, serving as an official Lamborghini factory driver in 2019 and winning the GT World Challenge Europe title with them. His versatility also spanned across multiple marquee championships, competing in European Le Mans Series and driving GT cars from Lamborghini Huracan, Porsche 911, BMW Z4, Mercedes AMG Evo to a Ferrari 296. By October 2024, his career totaled 45 wins, 92 podiums and 22 pole positions. Arguably the Stig's most enduring legacy is the power lap ball. Across 20 years, the Stigs created a definitive record of automotive performance on the Dunsfold Aerodome test track. As you'd expect, the lap ball got reset with each iteration of the Stig taking the helm, but each Stig had its own iconic moments. But perhaps one of the most iconic was when the Swedish Koenigsegg CCX was tested around the test track during the first episode of Series 8. The Koenigsegg had 900 horsepower and is the only hypercar capable of reaching 250 miles an hour with a manual gearbox. During Jeremy's showcase of the vehicle, he joked that the car was his new cure for quitting cigarettes, while also admiring the CCX's rawness and the beast Christian van Koseck's team had created. Handing the car over to the Stig for the power lap, the ultimate goal was for the CCX to beat the Pagani's time of 1:18.4. However, the CCX only managed a time of 1 minute 20.4, 2 whole seconds slower, but the Stig, aka Ben, reckoned the car could go faster if he was brave around the corners and later around the brakes. So during that second attempt, when passing through the follow-through, he crashed into a tyre wall and went off the track, damaging the front end. If the Stig can't control the CCX, you know this thing is deadly for normal drivers. If you read Ben Collin's book, he actually goes into depth here as to what happened when he was the Stig. They were actively trying to get the fastest car on the leaderboard for Christian von K multiple times, and the car had a ton of problems even after 1 or 2 laps. The power steering was cooked, the brakes kept going long because the master cylinder's stuffing up, and they still pushed onwards and kept trying.
How did that compare to other crashes? Is that one of the scarier moments of your life? Or?
No, it's pretty tame.
Oh really?
It
was
looked
high
terrible.
speed.
Yeah, it felt terrible because I think it was worth a £500,000 car. The hard thing with that machine was that there was a problem with the brakes, so they had to pump the brake pedal to get the brakes to stop the car.
Like a prototype then or something, wasn't it?
It was an early production
early car, so it wasn't
car,
quite
yeah.
finished.
No, it was there. It had done a lot of, it'd been hacked around a lot.
Oh, okay.
You go from usable steering to solid.
You didn't mention that on Top Gear.
And basically, I was just trying to get the nth degree, and it's an absolute beast to drive. That car really, it was very, very challenging, so you're really on your case. No,
not scary.
Not at all, but it was fast, and I got sideways at sort of 90 mile an hour or something, and I went to counter steer and I couldn't unwind the steering because it's me
Power
making my
steering
excuses.
failed, probably.
But yeah, it did. It seized up on the power steering, so I couldn't, and I literally it snapped back the other way, and I thought there's no tyre walls anywhere at that track really, and I managed to hit the only one on the whole site. I'd never even noticed this tyre wall existed, but it went off straight, buried the tyre wall, and then one of the big tyres got stuck inside the grille, and we were desperately trying to get it out because Christian von Koenigsegg was there on the day, and he came out in the ambulance, and we were trying to heave this thing out. It looked ridiculous.
The Stig, aka Ben, reportedly told producers that with a big wing on the back, the CCX would be several seconds faster. Essentially, a prescription for rear grip on the Dunsfold's fast-sweeping corners. Koenigsegg famously responded to this incident with an optional rear spoiler that fans nicknamed the Top Gear Wing. In episode 4 of Series 8, 3 episodes after the crash, the Stig took the car around the test track to set a new lap time, this time with a rear wing on the back in the hopes they would provide better downforce, with the addition of the spoiler on the back of 1 minute 17 seconds, 0.6, beating its original lap time by 2.8 seconds and the Pagani by 0.8 seconds, making the CCX the fastest car to go around the track. Clarkson ended this episode by saying, "We're not just testing cars on this show anymore, we're designing them." This lap time wouldn't be beaten until Phil Keen's Stig provided the time of 1:13.8 in the Pagani Hyora, which dethroned more powerful hypercars. Fans have endlessly debated about weather conditions, tyre choices, and whether the Stig's laps were perfectly repeatable. I tried to find some comparable data that shows us who the fastest Stig actually was, but due to the reasonably priced car changing multiple times, all 3 Stigs didn't drive the same car. However, Perry McCarthy achieved a PB in the Suzuki Liana of 1 minute 46. Meanwhile, Ben Collins was basically 2 seconds quicker with a time of 1 minute 44.4. The fastest professional driver in the Suzuki Liana is former F1 driver Daniel Ricciardo with a time of 1 minute 42.2. And the fastest celebrity lap time was achieved by Dame Ellen McCarthy with a time of 1 minute 46.7, beating the previous fastest time set by Simon Cowell by 0.2 seconds. As you can see from this table, the other fastest celebrities include a time of 1 minute 45.83 from JK in the Chevrolet, a time time of 1 minute 42.1 from former guest and host Matt LeBlanc in the Kia Ceed, and a time of 1 minute 44.6 from Ollie Mers in the Vauxhall Astra. If we include Top Gear USA as well, Stephen Mayer achieved a time of 1 minute 39.3 in a Suzuki SX4. In fact, the mystique of the Stig was expanded worldwide, with the US Top Gear having their own Stig portrayed by racing driver Paul Gerard. Not only that, throughout the life of Top Gear, the character was developed through various cousins such as Big Stig, Teenage Stig, Communist Stig, and African Stig, who was portrayed by racing driver Gugu Zula. These parodies reinforced the myth that the Stig was more than an idea than a person, a global brotherhood of silent drivers. Clarkson, Hammond and May have often described the Stig as the fourth presenter. Even after moving to the Grand Tour, they paid tribute to the character's legacy. The Stig was more than just a test driver. Even with Top Gear off the air, the Stig remains immortal, a faceless figure who taught millions how to love cars, not because of numbers, but because of the thrill of speed. As Clarkson once put it, the Stig is whatever you want him to be. He isn't one man, he's an idea, and ideas never really die. Thank you so much for watching this video, it really does mean a lot to me. Make sure to follow me on all of my socials at Phat Mima, like, subscribe, and comment below what you want to see next.